Self-worth can be a lonely game. It can take a lot of will and courage when we don't feel that we've got a great deal of self-worth to go for a walk in nature or to go to the cinema. And maybe self-worth, it's about being okay inside our mind and body. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Neil and I'm a health explorer, and if you're like me, you might recognise that health is kind of unique to you. You might also be curious to find out more from experts who can help you with your health and well-being, and maybe try one or two new ideas that might actually feel good. If that's you, then why not subscribe and hit the bell to get notified of all of our latest uploads. This week, my guest is Richard Tyler, a former West End lead, who today is an international speaker who works with entrepreneurs and CEOs. And today our topic is self-worth exercises. And we're going to find out what works and what doesn't. Richard, we're going to talk about self-worth exercises today, but before we do that, let's just define what self-worth is and what it isn't.
Yeah, there are lots of, if you Google it, it's a fascinating thing as to see what comes up, because there are so many self-words with, so we have self-worth and we have self-esteem and self-compassion and self-care, self-acceptance, self-love, all these different words. And I guess the common thread in all of them is about, is self, is the I within it somewhere, the deepest part of us. But I think where we often get confusion is between self-worth and self-esteem. And I think whilst they're often lumped together, I think there is a distinction. And I think if you look at the real essence of self-worth, that is about, do we fundamentally believe we are a good person? So we have that sense of being a good person that is worthy of respect. That is really important. So the worthy of respect from ourselves, respecting our own body and mind and emotions and spiritual slants, but also worthy of respect from outside of us. I think there is a slight difference with self-esteem, where I think the esteem is almost more about our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings about ourselves, whereas the worth is a much deeper sense of this. Maybe I can give you a really quick illustration. If you imagine that when you are born, this soul child is born. So actually it's a pure example of self, whatever language you want to attach to that. So the divine, our pure essence, out we come. And in our very formative months and years, we start to build on top of that our response mechanisms to the world, our defense mechanisms, almost our survival personalities, our patterns that mean we can deal with not being seen, not being acknowledged, not being recognized, not being appreciated, not being given love. So here's this kind of pure self, which comes out worthy and clean and untouched. And over time, we start to build these masks on top, the coverings, the shields, our armor. And we do that through our life. And what we end up with at some point, even into our kind of teenage years, and certainly our kind of early 20s, we have, here's the self, but actually what people see is this bit here, which is the personality, the identity, who we show up as. And often then for the latter part of our life, we start attempting to go, how do we get back closer so that this is more reflective of this? And self-worth exists in this piece, and self-esteem tends to be more work around this. So we're building up, how do we improve because we think this is us, but this is me, this is who I am. But actually what this is generally is our masks, our patterns, our habits, our reactions, our survival personality, and we've so lost sight of what this pure essence is. So I think it's quite an important distinction to make, because lots of self-help books and personal development books will spend time doing the work here. But if we really look at self-worth, actually it's about this work. It's about how do we get closer to understanding our purest essence of who we are when everything else is stripped away. When we strip away our jobs, our relationships, our money, our cars, our clothing, our stories that we tell ourselves in the world. When we strip away all of that, who are we and what are we left with? And actually, this is this piece here.
So,
But most talked about, of course, is the esteem and the confidence piece. But I think real self-worth actually is the long haul work. It's life work. It's really how do we leverage ourselves, that deep knowing, that deep truth of who we are.
how can too little or too much self-worth damage someone's life?
I think. Sorry, I'm just moving my screen around. I think in terms of too much, I think we can build too much in terms of self-esteem, and we'll often see that as ego. So if we go here and here again, if we start to do the work on building this, which again is disconnected from this, then we start to have an impact that can be arrogant, can be pushy, can be overly confident, can be dismissive of other people's ideas, other people's ways of doing things. We might be dismissive of support. So we tend to be very self-referenced if we build self-esteem, because often there's a real fine line between building something like that and then just reinforcing ego. So we reinforce all the masks and the stories we tell ourselves. And I don't know if we can have too much self-worth. I'm not sure. I've wrestled with that one a bit. Is it possible that our self-worth can be overly inflated? I think the true self, this is just my view, is actually able to regulate really well and is necessary to regulate. So I don't believe it can be fuller or bigger than it is. It just is. But it's really easy to build up this. We can do work on this and feel better about ourselves, but that might be very disconnected from what's going on inside. Actually, if you look at how many people build self-esteem, it's through that real deep personal development work that actually is about making themselves feel better, but it tends to be from the outside in. So how do I do the things that are outside of myself so I feel better rather than the inner work? So I don't know that we can actually have too much self-worth. Too little, and we have a whole series of issues. Most of them will fall into some kind of mental health space. So we've got, there's a potential for social anxiety. So people will be very uncomfortable being seen, being visible, being with others outside of their environment. So they'll tend to stay in. We have so many issues with comparisons. And of course, social media hasn't helped that at all. How do we keep up with the Joneses? Do I look that thin? Do I look that good? Do I look that young? Do I look that cool? So that comparison piece leads on obviously to quite a lot of other mental health issues. And certainly if we look at teenage years, teenage girls, probably the most challenging area in thinking about this. So we have all kinds of issues around self-harm. There is the potential for substance abuse because we want to escape ourselves. We want to get away from looking, being, feeling like that about ourselves and others. So it can easily lead to alcohol abuse, drug abuse. We've got eating and food disorders. So it becomes a way of comfort. If I look shit anyway, then who cares if I eat 25 burgers and drink 3 bottles of Coke? So there's a whole raft of, we've got depression. We'll have other forms of generalized anxiety disorder. So a whole raft of diagnosable mental health conditions. And that's obviously on a spectrum of being quite light and in some ways manageable, but still there. And if we don't acknowledge it and work on it, it has the potential to increase right through to various very serious rooted in self-worth issues that will come out in some of those ways I've just described.
Sure. So what are signs then of the healthy self-worth? Let's just take this a little deeper.
Okay, so as I've said, we often look for, we assume that self-worth is built on things like how we look, how much money we have, how successful we are at work, the types of people we hang out with, how fit we are, how strong we are, how far we can run, how good our grades were. So this comes back to all of those we think are markers. We go, oh, that's really that's really good self-worth, that's really high self-worth.
Mm.
But of course, the factor within all of those is that all of those things live outside of ourselves. Every single one of those is outside of ourselves, about money. So again, we're comparing and judging what others have, the size of our house, how fit we are, we're comparing. So they're all external, whereas real self-worth is an inner game to play. So the evidence that we have it, and I think sometimes we get really confused because the evidence can look quite close to that, but then I think when we have to take the wider personality into account. So you may have, let's give some examples. So you've got, say you've got Jenny. Okay, so Jenny did, she does kind of well at, she did well at school. She gets good grades. She's not the top of the class. She did okay in her exams. She's certainly never going to be a mathematician, but she applies herself and works hard, but her grades are always kind of okay. And actually, if you then take the context of her wider life, she feels really comfortable and secure and grounded in herself and believes she has worth and value, but also is really recognizes and acknowledges the gap between where she is and where some others are, but has just absolute comfort with that. So you see that whereas otherwise we might look at examples of people like that in the life that go, don't get good grades, maybe didn't do that well in GCSEs or A levels, not the top of the class. And actually that has huge impact on self-worth, self-esteem. But for Jenny, she goes, actually, that's okay. And that's how it is. And I know where I kind of know where my weak spots are. So there's something in here about being able to acknowledge the gaps. So strong self-worth, there can be lots of markers, but the piece that makes the difference is we acknowledge and we own the gaps and we're comfortable with that. That doesn't mean we don't work on it. It doesn't mean that Jenny doesn't go, how do I improve the quality of my maths? How do I still work on it? But it's done from a place of acceptance. I think acceptance is such an almost underused, undervalued quality, our ability to, without judgment, to just acknowledge and make space for where we are. So you've got, so maybe you've got Alan, who he kind of does exercise, but he's always slower than others. He runs, but would never get, he could do a marathon, but he'd never be placed anywhere near the front of kind of a leader's pack. He's, I don't know, he goes to the local book club every week. He reads a bit slower than all of the others. He doesn't always get the meaning and the depth within a story. He's really sociable. He loves meeting new people, but he often gets blown out by friends. They stand him up, or people he arranges to meet, they go, oh, sorry, I'm not up for it now. But actually, he feels really good about himself and the place he occupies on this planet, and can acknowledge where he is, but he can also acknowledge the gaps between those things. So again, holds them with a place of acceptance and going, that isn't the ideal. What I like, yes, she reads faster and she gets all the meaning, but actually that's how it is. And she's really great at that bit, and I'm really great at this bit, and I do it, and it takes effort, and actually that's okay. So there's this real push and pull between, we might see a drive in people to excel and develop and work on a quality, but at the same time, there is a comfort and an acceptance of where they are now, and that where I am now and where I could be, that doesn't diminish me as a person. That doesn't take away from me as a person. So vulnerability and acceptance is loaded in there. And of course, and I'm sure you'll know this too, we can see people who will talk of vulnerability and acceptance story. So we'll see them go, I'm really comfortable with how I am and where I am and who I am. But actually when they're under pressure and they're in a place that feels quite tense for them in life, that's when we really see what's coming out. So we see that there is a fight, they are hard on themselves, they do kick their own backside, they do think they're shit. The difference is those that have some really strong sense of worthiness. So remember, this is about respect of self, and a sense of getting respect from others about where they are. we'll see that as being pretty consistent when self-worth is in place, when we see healthy self-worth.
That's really interesting, and I think what you're saying is such an important message, especially for young people, growing up, and the pressures that they find on themselves as they're growing up, and with their self-worth and what they need to be doing at school, and also the external pressures that then amount on them. I think it's really interesting what you say there.
There's so much comparison, isn't there? And I did a live recently about social media impact, and that's kind of the new Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. And there are some appallingly shocking statistics in there for mental health cases, suicide cases, and self-harm cases in the States, in that age group of 10 to 19-year-old girls. That has been a massive spike since social media became available on mobile phones in 2009. And 2 years after that, they saw this tremendous spike by about, in the younger category, preteen, 181% spike in hospitalized self-harm cases in that age group. So, of course, playing in that space, we're into comparison. What have they got? And that's how we're putting a value on self-worth and self-esteem by, does she do it better? Does she do it more? Is she thinner? Can she run faster? Has she got more boys? Does she get more likes? So if we're using that as a measure, that's really tough on ourselves. And of course, really tough to escape it as well, because we go, everyone's doing it. We're all, I feel that sense sometimes of, oh, no one's liked my post. Oh, maybe it was shit. Maybe it was a shit article. I can still do that. I'm human. I mean, and that's probably where it ends, and I get over myself. But I do have that moment of going, oh, I didn't get as many likes. I didn't get as many comments.
Yeah.
But in terms of, for those that are watching this who are parents, a really important just conversation to be having with yourself as a parenting unit about what are the ways that we build self-worth with, especially in that adolescent teenage years. How do we acknowledge and honor them and fully see them? I think there's a massive role in adult mental health from the way in which we are parented. Completely
agree with that. So we're talking about self-worth exercises. We're going to jump into that in just a second. Anyone watching this video, please do give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying what Richard is talking to us about here. Give us a thumbs up, because that does help the channel. So Richard, what are some of the exercises or tools available that could elevate someone's self-worth?
So I think there are lots, and there's no one size fits all. And I guess there's a bit that is dependent on the springboard that we're going into it from. So some people are wanting to work on self-worth because they have a bit of a spiritual emergency, a bit of a crisis of meaning in their life. And that means perhaps their mental health has plummeted. So they might be in a different space to those that are going, actually, I just kind of feel pretty shit about who I am, and I don't feel good about myself in a relationship, in work. So we must remember that people are coming at it from different angles. I think the ultimate, and some will go, well, you would say that because you're a therapist, and maybe that's true. And I look at the work that's required, and I've already said, kind of, actually, if we're really working on self-worth, it's the long haul. It's life's work. There's not a something we do where we go, right, I'm there, I'm sorted. It's life's work. So we don't know what's around the corner, and we don't know how our kind of legs get pulled out from underneath us. But I think one of the most powerful and profound ways to build that, talk about it as almost I-self connection. So we're going, how do we really understand the self when we might be a long way away over here with our personality and what we developed, is to do the deep work with a therapist. I know we're still shifting the whole idea of what it means to be in therapy, to have a therapist. Does that mean we're broken? So that stigma, we're starting to kind of collapse some of that stigma. But the thing about kind of reconnecting with our self-worth is that it requires time and it requires effort, and it often requires the untangling of stories that have led us to this place. Okay, so the disentangling and understanding of the patterns and stories that have led us to be so far removed from our real essence. And my belief is that that work is incredibly difficult and potentially unsafe to do on our own, to do via a self-help workbook. I think we can work on our self-esteem so we can make the masks a bit stronger and happier and more joyous, but I don't think we get to this. And I think if we are really serious about doing this, then it's finding a therapist that will work with you in a way that helps you build that I-self connection, that helps you track back to your essence and understand all of the knots that have tied us up, that have moved us from here to acting from a place of here. So that's, for me, I think that's my ultimate. And I know that's far removed from what a lot of people feel able to do. I think some kind of retreat, because if we go ultimately what this is about, it's about stripping back. It's about stripping away. It's about being able to remove the armor and the masks and look within. So it's inner work, whatever the strategy is, whatever the intervention or the tool, it's doing the inner work. So there may be some kind of a retreat that helps you strip back the masks. Certainly for men, things like the Menkind Project, some kind of, it's almost like it's a bit like a vision quest. It's a bit like a rites of passage, I guess, to reconnect with that essence of us. But there are, Menkind Project is the most popular one for the blokes, I guess, to go and do over a long weekend, or some of their slightly longer retreats, to start to build that connection. Spiritual retreats that then are more appealing and more open. Again, some people will be put off by spiritual. They think it has about religion. It isn't about that at all. It's about just that sense of the transpersonal. There is something beyond us. It isn't just about us. There is something beyond. And only when we start to look at what is beyond and bigger than us and how that connects to the deepest part of us, do we again start to strengthen this. So lots of options for people to go on retreats and do some really intensive, deep work. And then I guess with the other end of the extreme, you've got the simplicity of things like, daily affirmations, daily rituals that reaffirm ourselves. For some people, they couldn't think of anything worse than looking in the mirror and, talking to themselves and telling themselves how much they honor them and acknowledge them and love themselves. Actually, I agree with that. I mean, that is not for me, to stand in the mirror and tell myself how much I love me. It feels completely bullshit. But for some people, that feels very nourishing and enriching to do that. And if that works for someone, then hey, that's really great. And there's a lot of research and science around the power of affirmations and the power of the story we tell ourselves, because that's what this is about ultimately. It's what happened from here to here, the stories that we then tell ourselves, that we have been told by others and that we have started to believe and take on as a truth. And if we are able through affirmations to start telling a different story, then we start to loosen some of the knots. And the affirmations will tend to work more with the esteem, the masks, what we've built up around us, our survival personality, perhaps than the real self-worth. This is almost so distant from us, for most of us, that the affirmations won't make enough of a dent to get back to here. But that doesn't in any way take away from the power of using them.
So we've explored some of the options that people can use. What would be, I mean, in your experience, are there particular kind of cases where someone who's going through a particular part of self-worth, where one kind of tool would be more important or better than another? You
mean out of the ones that I've already talked about, or we're talking?
I mean, is a time where hypnotherapy, let's say, is better maybe than affirmations, or affirmations better than it? Do you see what I mean? I'm just wondering what.
Yeah, I mean, I think So I'm going to put it out there, which there'll be some people then that just firmly disagree with. And I actually think before I started work down a psychotherapeutic route, I might have done the same. Actually, would have gone. I probably would have said, "Oh, it's just kind of the grandiose of psychotherapy that thinks it is, is the right place to be." And I don't think I come from that perspective. And yet, what I have learned in the last couple of years is that we all, regardless of the quality of our childhood and our upbringing, and whether we would say we had a good childhood, I think I had a really good childhood. I think I was really fortunate to be brought up in the way I was brought up. And what I have discovered in doing the work on myself and the need to be in weekly therapy is that there is a huge amount of wounding.
Mm.
There is a huge amount of childhood wounding that doesn't come from all the things that we assume that might come from, where we go, well, that's about abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. It comes from the smallest of things that were at the time done with good intent. So there's a lot of wounding. And I think doing that kind of work requires absolute care, requires a very, very safe container to do that work in. And that's my, whenever I speak to potential clients, actually the thing I will always want them to consider is the quality of that container that wraps around you when you do that work is the ultimate, is the piece to be looking for. So whether you go hypnotherapy, again, I think hypnotherapy needs something broader than hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy might help us reconnect with some of this, but what it is less likely to do is to disentangle the patterns and the stories. So I really think if we're serious about building that I-self connection, that the therapeutic relationship and the quality of the container that we have around us to do that work is fundamental. Almost the modality that we choose is whether we choose to go Gestalt psychotherapy or hypnotherapy or psychosynthesis, whatever we choose, almost to go, it matters less. Research tells us that the quality of the container, the quality of someone being relational with us is the bulk of the work.
Yeah.
So I think it's on such a case by case basis. It's
Sure.
really hard. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries.
Answer.
No, it's interesting actually just to explore some of those different options, because I think sometimes when people are going through things, they maybe don't always realize the options available. And obviously you brought in personalities into this as well. The right therapist, just the person who listens to you in the right kind of way for you, can actually make a huge difference. So thank you for
they did a massive research study a couple of years ago about actually what is it that really makes the difference between all the different therapies, therapeutic kind of psychotherapeutic tools and interventions that we can use. And actually, in putting all of them alongside each other, what came out as being the most important quality of it and the most determining factor of a successful intervention was the quality of the way the therapist could be relational with the client. So yes, we go, of course, there's a difference between Gestalt and psychoanalysis, and all of those are different, but actually the quality of that relationship and the way in which the person is held is what determines the greatest success in there. And I think that's really important for anyone who is going to undertake any kind of therapeutic relationship. I take absolute care if I'm having someone in to decorate the walls. I go, what's the quality of their work, and how do they work, and how do they set it up, and how do they engage with me, how do they tidy up afterwards? And you go, God, we're talking about allowing someone into our life house. Someone is going to go in and root around with us and tinker about and prod things. And I think we have a duty of care to ourselves to just to find the right person to do the work with.
Completely with you on that one, which is one of the reasons why with Total Wellness Club we invite therapists to ask their customers to leave reviews, because then somebody who's new can see what their customers have been saying about them, so that they can get some
Yeah.
idea of the experience that they can have with
Yeah.
that person, with that therapist. Because when you're inviting somebody in to help you with your health and well-being, you're actually passing over a degree of responsibility or care to those people with your mind, your body, and your spirit, which is a
Yeah.
huge responsibility for that therapist. So you do want to make sure that you're getting the right person in for you. Completely agree with
Yeah.
you. Let's move
And
on.
for
And look
most of us, of course,
go
so
on.
to say, for most of us, we don't have a model of that, do we? We know what it might be like to get a good decorator or a good cleaner for our house. We kind of go, well, but actually, how the hell do any of us know in terms of any health, therapeutic, interventional support or coach? What most of us don't have anything to pitch it against.
Yeah. Let's just wrap up with a challenge. So we like to make things really practical. We've talked about quite a few things in the last half an hour or so. What would be one thing that someone could take away and try based on what we've been discussing today?
Okay, so I'm actually going to bring something. I'm going to bring something new in for a minute, because I think it's really important in the challenge piece, and we haven't touched on it. I know you and I have talked about it before, but building our self-worth, doing any work on ourselves, is an act of will, right? So it's an act of, within us, our willpower, our desire, our hunger to do that work. And I think it's really important just to acknowledge that with no will, if we don't have any will to do it, so intellectually people might tell us, and the doctor might tell us that we need to do something, but if we have no will, we are simply not going to take action. And the stages of will, I think, are just really important to share, because actually this links with the challenge I want to give, is that our first stage of will is having no will. So if you look at people that go on 12-step programs, recovery programs, they arrive often with no will, going, what's the point? It's all right. It's all right for you, Neil, to be able to do that. It's all right for you to say that you can go running 5K, but you don't know what life's like for me. You don't know about the quality of my needs. I couldn't do it. I've never been able to do it. What's the point? Anyway, it's not going to make any difference. It's going to make me feel much worse. And if you look at a lot of people that are in quite a difficult and entangled place with their self-worth and their self-esteem, they'll be starting at a point of no will. There's no point. It's pointless. It's hopeless. They're always going to be better than me, and I'm just life shit. The second stage of will is will exists, and this is really, really important, because from no will to will exist is where we start to see the potential, and we find that potential by generally being around others and starting to get a sense of, if they could do it, so could I. Well, actually, if Neil was able to go from being this and doing it this way to that, maybe I could. Maybe I know he worked hard, and we might dance around between no will and will exist. But it's a really fundamental stage, because if we just kind of attempt to gut out building self-worth with no will, it ain't going to happen. So we're going to yo-yo around for quite a long time, where we intellectually go, of course I can, but then we're not going to. There's something in there. If people are serious about doing some work on self-worth, self-esteem, we'll put that in there as well, that is recognizing, where is your will blocked, and where can you and how can you start to activate your will. So the circle of people that you hang out with is really going to determine, and that might mean that you need to hang out in some online groups, some membership sites, or some local kind of meetup groups, where you'll start to just see that there are some other people who have been in your place that are now starting to do something to activate and free their will. So I want to bring will in, because I think it's really important, and I want to bring it in because the challenge really for you and for everyone that's watching is about, how do you start to activate your will and understand where your will is blocked? So my challenge for you this week is to do one thing, just one, that will strengthen your will. So our will is fundamental to everything we do on a day-to-day basis. Absolutely at the heart of it. If there is will, there's a chance that it will happen. If there's no will, it ain't happening. So of course, there's a million things you can do that will help activate your will, and people can come up with their own. I've come up with a list of things. One is, even if you feel really tired in doing the thing that you're doing, or you feel heavily drawn to do something else just because you go, oh, I'm a bit bored of this thing, I want to do that now, continue doing that thing for 5 more minutes. So consciously recognize to go, oh, I might just stop doing that now. I think I've had enough of that. Stay with it just for another 5 minutes. So there's a pure act of will, conscious will to go, actually, I'm not going to stop now. I'm just going to keep doing this for another 5 minutes. Do something really slowly. So something that you know you're comfortable with doing, now do it really slowly and with precision. So you will take longer over it. Again, a really critical act of will. Another one would be say no when you know that the answer no is the right thing to do, but saying yes feels much easier. Okay, so when you're in a situation, say no when that part of you goes, I know that saying no is the right thing, but yes would be easier because we can just move on. I don't have to have that difficult conversation. So again, a massive act of will. So will is one of the key activities to building and developing and strengthening your self-worth. So that would be my challenge this week, is to park doing work on self-worth at the moment and find ways to activate and strengthen your will. Because without that, the self-worth work won't happen.
Brilliant, Richard. Really do appreciate your time exploring the topic today of self-worth and self-worth exercises. It's been really valuable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
As a health and wellness explorer, I'm always interested in what connects the body and the mind. So talking about self-worth, in particular self-worth exercises today, it's good to know that there are so many options available, and it's also interesting to note that the personality of the person that you go to for help, for that therapy or for that coaching to help you can actually have a huge impact. After finishing the interview with Richard, he mentioned a book by Piero Ferrucci, What We May Be, and he described the book as being gentle and provocative for anyone who wants to explore their self-worth more. Self-worth can often be affected by things we've gone through in early life, especially if we've suffered some kind of trauma in our younger years, and that can be affecting who we are today, and it can be affecting our self-worth. Are you going to take Richard's challenge? It could be life-changing if you do. I'll be taking the challenge. You can see my findings from this challenge in our Challenge Roundup video, which is a monthly summary covering all the challenges our experts shared. To get that video and all our latest health and wellness uploads, including interviews and reviews, subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified whenever we post. And if this channel can help your friends and family, please share it with them too. Also, if you want to get proactive with your health, Total Wellness Club are developing health quests over at questly.life. Join while we're developing the site and get access to health quests that immediately personalize your health. You'll get to identify which of 10 critical health categories need your attention. You'll be able to track your progress, and you'll be able to help us develop the platform. I'll put a link in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.